I'm hoping everybody can hear me. Thank you all for coming. And I'd like to welcome you all to this evening's Children and Young People's Scrutiny, the first of this year. I'd also like to extend a warm welcome to the new committee members. Councillor Brown and Miranda, you are obviously standing in for him. Thank you very much. And Councillor Coleman and Councillor Cross, who unfortunately sends his apologies, but we'll cover those later. Dawn, I'd also like to take this opportunity to congratulate you on, subject to ratification at full council, recommended to take up the position of the Strategic Director for Children's Services. Dawn, pleasure. Dawn is the lead officer for this committee, and I know from working with you over the past year that the recommendation is richly deserved and is excellent news for both the service and the council. So let's hope the ratification goes well. I feel absolutely certain it will.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely, my pleasure. And I'm sure everybody else will echo those thoughts. And if not, please keep them to yourself. So to practical matters, can I remind everybody to mute unless you're addressing an item and to use your virtual hands. It's just so much easier to track what's going on if you use your virtual hands. If you wish to speak at any point in the meeting. I'm going to refer to Joe from governance if I need to record a vote for any procedural matters. Joe, can you confirm that only the committee members may use the chat facility?
Yes, I can. I've switched off. We don't have anybody observing at the moment.
No, somebody may sneak in, mightn't they? And then
yeah.
Yes, exactly. So great stuff. So thank you, everybody. So moving first to apologies. I've received apologies from Councillor Brown, and as we previously said, Miranda is standing in, Councillor Jones is acting as stand-in. I've also received apologies from Councillor Cross. Joe, do we have any other apologies?
No.
Great stuff, thank you. Agenda item 2 then, minutes. This is to confirm the minutes of the Children and Young People's Scrutiny Committee meeting held on the 18th of March 2021, and also the minutes from the joint budget meeting held with the Adults and Health Scrutiny Committee on the 28th of April. Unless there are any dissenters, I'd like to take them together. I don't see any rapid raising of hands, so I'm going to assume now there's an assent. I'll propose them. Can I have a seconder, please? For the Sam, I think you were probably here. Oh, Nick, sorry, I missed you. Yeah. So Councillor Beggy will second them. Can I have a show of hands? Will suffice now to accept the minutes, please. Okay, and Councillor Beggy is obviously accepted. So, and I'm assuming these are passed, yeah.
Yes, minutes are confirmed. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any declarations of interest? Item 3.
Yes.
Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Chair. It's just item item number 9. Sorry, the Rutland Children's Services offer. It was seen by the Children and Young People's Partnership in a workshop on the 10th of June, of which I'm part of as in my role as Children's Champion. So I have seen that item previously.
Okay, thank you for letting me know. I don't think that has any material effect on, that's great. We'll continue. Thank you. Declaration of visit number 3. Number 4, any petitions, deputations or questions?
None have been received for this evening, Chair.
Okay, thank you. So item 5, any questions have been received?
No, none of those either.
Great. Okay. Notices of motions from members?
None received.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we turn to item 8, which is the appointment of the Vice Chair. Do we have any nominations, members? No. No nominations? Absolutely certain, last chance. Okay. In which case I'll carry this over as an agenda item for the next meeting and hope that there can be some private discussions in the interim and a nomination will be forthcoming at the next meeting. Thank you. So now we turn very quickly to Rutland Children's Service offer. I'll hand over to Dawn, who is standing in for somebody, I can't remember who.
Kevin Quinn was going to be attending alongside me tonight,
Right,
but unfortunately
okay.
Kevin's not in work at the moment following a operation. So
All sounds very serious. I hope he gets better soon.
he's
Thank you.
fine. Yeah, he'll just and I think Joe is going to be an able assistant and share
Okay.
the presentation on screen.
I am. Just bear with me a moment because I've had a few issues with this. So hopefully this will work in 1 second. Can you all see that?
Not yet.
Oh, let me.
Oh,
Now.
Yes.
now we can.
Yes, good.
Yeah.
Okay, so next slide, please, Joe. So I thought it would be useful to do a presentation to you on a piece of strategic work that I'm leading in children's services, which I think the purpose of tonight was really to update members of Scrutiny on the progress of our review, but really to get your input to discuss what the opportunities are to strengthen our children's offer to families, both now, but obviously thinking about a sustainable future, to get your views, to have a conversation with members of Scrutiny, particularly as we go through the presentation at the end, whether you think we're on the right track, whether it makes sense to you, and really I welcome those comments. And then at the end, there's I wanted to share some information on a new transitional safeguarding project that we're scoping out at the moment. And again, I think what the transitional safeguarding project that I'll come to, it's an example of kind of our forward thinking and thinking about how we can have a sustainable children's services offer, but also thinking about that greater integration with adult services as well. Next slide, please, Joe. So the reason why we're doing this piece of work, twofold really. It's clearly part of the council's recovery plan, particularly thinking about our budget position as a council and how children's services contributes to that, but also given the pandemic, thinking about what impact the impact COVID has had, particularly on 3 key areas. Clearly, the first bullet point should say the lives and needs of children and families, actually, because that's the most important driver. But clearly, COVID's had an impact on how we've delivered services over the last 12 months, but also how we want to continue to deliver some services as well, moving into the future. And again, it's about the financial impact on Rutland County Council and the need for us to think about how we target our resources more effectively. Next slide. So this slide just shows you really the kind of what we've been doing over the last few months since February. We've very much wanted to do the process in partnership, both with our staff teams themselves, obviously our external partners, and clearly members as well. And this is all part of a kind of ongoing discussion that we're having across the piece. So we have done some work already with our Children and Young People's Partnership, with which all our partners and the voluntary sector are represented. We've done workshops with staff, and interestingly, we targeted some of the questions within the Future Rutland conversation to try, obviously to children and young people, but also some of the broader questions about what the community wants life to be like in Rutland. And we're just getting that analysis back at this point in time, which we will feed in. Clearly, I'm here tonight to talk to Scrutiny, And we've also launched a family survey specifically too. So that's ongoing throughout this month and next month. So the idea is that in August, we will be collating all of that, and in September, be in a position to kind of finalise our offer and put that out to consultation. So this isn't your only chance to kind of feedback. It's very much a starting point. So in terms of our vision and principles, you might have to click, Joe, the bullet points. You can click through all the bullet points, sorry. So our vision for children's services, which is already been laid out, is for all children and young people in Rutland to be happy, safe and successful. And what we mean by that is that we want them to be supported and empowered to be the best they can be. We want our children to experience an aspirational and inclusive education offer in their community. And that's really important, particularly when we think about children with additional needs or special educational needs. We also want needs to be identified and managed or resolved the first time we need to intervene. So the first time that a child or a family comes to our attention in children's services, we want to get it right for them the first time. And we also clearly want to minimise escalation to specialist services such as children's social care, and maximise that de-escalation. So that, and what I mean by that is when a family may be experiencing difficulties, we want to intervene quickly. We want to get the right services to them, which allows them to create stability within that family and stop that escalation of need occurring. One of our principles underpinning our vision is about the focus on signposting to community support and focused intervention. What I mean by focused intervention is being absolutely clear about what a need, what family needs, what a child needs, and meeting those specific needs rather than having a very broad range of services that might not be specific enough to meet those needs. And I think really the last bullet point is really, really important. We absolutely believe that families often have the solution to their own needs and challenges. So by and large, parents meet the needs of their children. And sometimes they just need a little bit of help along the way. And that absolutely is underpinned by our preferred model of practice, which is signs of safety, which is very much a strength-based approach to the work that we do with children and families. In terms of our offer, so this is the proposed offer, and this is kind of where I'm really interested in whether this kind of speaks to you and whether you know what your thoughts are. So the offer that we want to move into is that we have a focused approach where our services are provided as soon as additional needs are identified, and I think that's the key phrase. As I said previously, families and communities support each other really well and actually have the solution to most issues that all of us will face from time to time. The role of children's services, as in council children's services, are where there's additional needs that need a little bit more either professional input, whether that's therapeutic, for example, or specific parenting input. And so that's where our focus needs to be. And we need to ensure that there's no lost opportunities. And what I mean by that is that families receive that help, the specific help they require right from the moment that that their additional needs are identified, and that we prevent that escalation into the higher cost services such as social care. We'll do that by providing an integrated early help partnership offer, which addresses adverse impact on children and families' well-being. And that partnership offer is really, there's a lot of work being done with our partners, because what we recognise is that there's a lot of other professionals within across the community, and who are working with families, and we want to bring that together so that our partners are really supporting our services, and most importantly, we're not duplicating services. And we also are clear that we will be providing focused and specialist services when families need the most, and that there's no delay to those. I think the last bullet point really is really where we've kind of need to make the shift in terms of thinking about sustainable children's services for the future, and that's about being a shift from being a main provider of everything to an integrated collaborative system approach to service delivery. And that's about that partnership working, and really not being overly paternalistic as a county council service, but actually utilising all of the expertise that our partners and our community sector can provide. So in terms of key approaches, I've just mentioned our community and voluntary sector. I mean, I think what we've seen in the last 12 months is really just how vibrant and valuable our community sector and voluntary sector is in Rutland, and I think we really want. I think perhaps in the past we haven't utilised that as well as we could have done, and so that's one of the key approaches to this whole piece of work, is exploring that role and how we can support the community to support each other and themselves. Channel shifting is another element. So we are looking at self-serve and virtual services. What I would say is, over the last 12 months, as you're very well aware, we have been offering services virtually in the main, apart from children's social care, which I'll come back to. But if we think about our early help and children's centre offer, most of our group work has been virtual, and actually it's been very welcomed in the main. Now, that's not to say it's going to remain fully virtual, but I think what we recognise is actually it has worked better for some families, both in terms of being able to access groups, for example, at a time of day that suits them, rather than a time of day that might suit the workforce. And actually, I think we need to learn about that accessibility and learn from that. Children's social care is slightly different. At the beginning of the pandemic, we did do virtual visits, but we've actually been doing face-to-face direct work and visits with the most vulnerable children, really all the way through. So that is a slightly different position for children's social care. The other approach is that our services need to be intelligence-led, and we need to look at what the needs of our community are, so that what needs are being presented at our front door, what families presenting with, and that's where we need to kind of have agile services that are intelligence-led, rather than thinking we're going to provide X because we think it's a good idea. We need to change that around. we're looking at the less reliance on a place, and obviously we're reviewing how we use our capital assets. This isn't unusual to children's services. Obviously, this is it. We're part of the corporate review as well of our assets. But again, it goes back to that channel shifting and having more of a hybrid approach in terms of how we offer services. So it's not all about offering services from one particular place. I mentioned at the beginning joint working with adult services, and an example that I'll be coming back to is transitional safeguarding. I think we've got lots of opportunities to further integrate with our adults colleagues, which will benefit not just young people but also adults as well. And as I've already mentioned, developing our partner contribution and promoting greater accountability within our partners. Often our partners, or too often I would say, our partners look to us to be the lead on everything, and actually what we're working with our partners on is actually, for example, them being the lead professional for a team around the child, rather than it always being a member of children's services staff. And obviously underpinning everything that we're working on is workforce development, and making sure that we've got a really skilled, confident workforce who are able to deliver services in the way we want. So in practice, what does that mean? So at the moment, we're already supporting the voluntary and community sector to develop their universal offer and services for families, because that's where we see their key role in providing. We're already starting to we already target a number of services to those most in need, and again, I'll come back to the transitional safeguarding projects as an example between children and adults. We're already growing our partnership capacity through an enhanced training offer to partners. We've been doing an awful lot of work with schools already, but and our health partners in particular. And as I've said the word hybrid before, the idea is that we will have a hybrid delivery of our activities. So we will still use place-based activities when we need to, and that will be probably when we need to offer more targeted focus support for families who've got particular additional needs. But we're not ignoring the universal access either, and that's probably, in terms of universal access, that's probably where we'll be looking at our virtual offer. So in terms of the next steps over the next couple of months, we'll continue with our engagement sessions and complete those. We'll be obviously reflecting on all the feedback that we're receiving from our stakeholders, and then be finalising the children's offer. The last and most important element will be implementation, of course, and we're already starting to think about how we might be implementing our children's services offer, and that might be about how we structure our services, for example, to deliver them for a sustainable future. I'll just give a little bit more detail on the transitional safeguarding project, just because it might be something that some of you are very familiar with in terms of transitional safeguarding, and others might not be. So I thought it might be helpful if I just gave a little bit of background as to what it is. So as you'll probably be very aware, there's very different statutory frameworks between children and adult social care. So that what that can mean is that children who are protected through children's social care and have a high level of support offered to them and worked with. Once they hit 18, they don't necessarily fall under an adult social care remit, because the thresholds for intervention are very different. So what transitional safeguarding does, it recognises that kind of difference, and also particularly when we're thinking about adolescents. So I'm talking kind of 14 to 18, that age group, who we know probably won't be eligible for adult social care because their needs aren't so high that they would meet that threshold. But actually, what we also know is that something magical doesn't happen at 18, that you'll suddenly wake up when you're 18 and one day and you're a fully rounded, competent, confident adult. That we all know that doesn't happen. But what it does mean is that for children, particularly who've experienced trauma and abuse, they're still left with a lot of need into particularly maybe mental health, but not necessarily a diagnosed mental illness. Or they may be, they may need independence work, so ongoing help around their confidence, getting a job, all of those sorts of things. And the key point being that when statutory safeguarding services adopt a transitional approach between them, it prevents that cliff drop in services which can occur once the children's duty ends, but the adults doesn't start because the threshold isn't met. And so transitional safeguarding involves moving away from that eligibility kind of approach towards a wider consideration of young people's needs and life experiences as a whole. So why are we doing it? We've already started in terms of looking at what the need in Rutland is for our young people. So we've already reviewed 16 and 17-year-old young people's cases that have been closed to social care in the last year, just to understand kind of what's happened to them, understand what their needs were at the point they were closed to social care, and what ongoing support may have been required or indeed beneficial. And the key themes that we've picked out and seen frequently is around parental disputes, sexual abuse and risks of exploitation, early drug dependency, mental distress, and low-level support needs. So I'm not talking about young people who go on to have a diagnosed mental illness. It's that kind of lower level mental health and emotional health support. And as I mentioned, key things witnessing trauma as well. What we're working on at the moment in terms of proposed delivery model is an integrated transitions. It says team. It might not be a physical team, it might be a virtual team, who basically provides preventative support for young people known to children's services at the age of 14, to start planning and support their transition into adulthood at a much earlier stage. And it's a model of early joint working that's strength-based. So again, it's very much part of our practice model. And it's absolutely focused on working with young adults to achieve positive outcomes. So that could be about accessing further education or accessing, helping gain employment, but it could be around independent living skills, for example, or emotional resilience. And I think the reason we're doing this is because actually there's benefits both to adult services in terms of preventing escalation into higher cost specialist services such as adult services, but actually it's about kind of creating a community in Rutland of young adults who are confident, who are aspirational, and who go on to be successful and valuable members of our community, and also parents themselves, because what we do know in children's services is young people, they get older, they have children themselves, and actually if we haven't supported them well enough, and if they haven't gained those independence skills, that those parenting skills, they come, you know, it comes back into the system, and we really want to prevent that kind of circular oh dear, I've lost the word there, a vicious circle of coming back into specialist services. So that's, as I said, in terms of this transitional safeguarding model, it's very much embryonic. It's something that's being looked at across the Safeguarding Children's Partnership and Safeguarding Adults boards. So we're looking at it across Leicestershire, Leicester City and ourselves as at that strategic level. But what we didn't want to do in Rutland is wait for Leicestershire and Leicester City to decide what they wanted to do. We've decided to look at what the children's needs and young adults' needs are in Rutland, and to start to kind of formulate something that's very much a Rutland solution. So I will leave it there, but just pose a couple of questions now to committee. So the first one is going back to our children's services offer. Do you think we've got our priorities right? Does it make sense in terms of the principles that I outlined, and what our approach will be? And importantly, is there anything that you think we haven't considered and we need to? And I will open the floor.
Thank you very much for that, Dawn. I found that really useful. But I'm going to reserve comment, and as you say, we'll open to the floor and take questions from the floor. So the first hand I've got is Councillor Beggy.
Thank you, Dawn. Thank you for that presentation. It's very difficult to argue with any of your points. The future looks quite bright. But my first question is more a favour, really. All of the words on there look fantastic and a great way forward. I wonder if you could try and bring it to life with me a little bit, with maybe some hypothetical examples about how the offer is now and how you view it will be in the future. Because it's very easy, it's very difficult to look at these words and really understand what that means practically.
Yeah. So one example. So if I think about our children's centre, so in terms of Vision's Children's Centre, during the pandemic, pre-pandemic, sorry, everything was place-based. So everything was offered from the Children's Centre, which is one place in Oakham. Now, what happened during the pandemic? So that immediately means that there will be members of our community outside of Oakham who may be isolated, who aren't able to get to Oakham easily, that we might not have been reaching as effectively as we could. During the pandemic, we obviously went fully into a virtual world, and what we've found is actually that there's been a wider engagement, but also because of the way we were working, we had to reduce our offer to a certain extent, so that we had to prioritise our most vulnerable children and families initially, and what we found was that a number of our families fed back that they found it much easier to engage through a virtual medium. And there's lots, it wasn't necessarily Zoom, there's lots of Facebook Live, etc. has been used. They've been very, and I think what I've seen over the last 12 months is a great creativity within the service in terms of thinking about how they offered their groups, for example. So they ran live groups, so in real time, but they were all recorded as well. So also, if a parent wasn't able to attend the group at the particular time it was running, everything was recorded and they could access it at a time that suited them. Now that sounds quite a small thing, but actually the feedback has been overwhelmingly positive about that. In terms of the partners, so we talk about a team around a child, particularly when we're thinking about early help, and a lead professional. Now, the lead professional role is any professional or a professional who does the coordination of the support around a family. In Rutland, it's I think I would say 9.5 times out of 10, it's always been a early help worker who's taken on that role, as in a county council employee. And actually, what we need to move to, and this is kind of the work that we're doing at the moment, is actually getting our partners, because sometimes our only role has been to do the coordination rather than offering the direct service ourselves, and we need to shift from doing that and enabling our partners and supporting our partners to take on that role of coordinator, because actually families don't need yet another professional. If we're not offering anything other than coordination, then we shouldn't really be involved in a family's life. So I would say that's one of our possibly biggest challenges, is kind of moving our partners into that place, and we are having some success with that, but that will take time to embed.
No, thank you, Dawn. That's very helpful. You have brought it to life. I think the whole idea of channel shift and hybrid working, I think one thing we've all learned is that's got to be the way forward to improve engagement.
Yeah.
If I just beg one more question of you, absolutely this is the right way to go, but what does success look like? How are you going to benchmark it and then come back to us in a year, 2 years time and say, actually, this has worked, and how are we going to see that?
In terms of what will success look like, I mean, well, there's several things. The first focus will be on what are the outcomes for children telling us. Are we some of that will be underpinned by data, for example, referrals. So what I want to see is very few referrals into my front door at Children's Services, because what that will tell me is that actually we're meeting children's needs and families' needs right the first time, as opposed to the second or the third time. So if that sort of performance data will obviously tell its own story, and luckily in Rutland, because our numbers are low, we are able to get really into the detail of individual children's stories. So we'll be able to do that qualitative analysis as well, in terms of, are we, at the first point, we have a plan. This is what we're setting out to achieve, and then reviewing that at the point of 6 months or at closure. Have we met those needs, and doing that piece of analysis. The other element, of course, is one of the underpinning principles is about having sustainable children's services, and that comes back to, are we able to deliver our services in a cost-effective and sustainable way as well? And the numbers, I suppose, will tell their own tale on that. But yeah, it's those, they're the kind of benchmarks that we'll be able to measure.
So you're confident, Dawn, that if we come back in a year or 2 years, you will be able to demonstrate what's the success of what you've implemented?
Yeah, I would give me 18 months to 2 years, because I think some of the stuff I've talked about in terms of partners is part of that's a culture change, and culture change does take quite a long time. But yes, absolutely. I mean, that would be absolutely my intention, to be able to come back and say, this is, we've done this is the outcome, and hopefully it's, the success of it as well.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Dawn.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So Miranda, if you look, Councillor Jones, if you'd like to take the floor, please.
Thank you. Good evening, Dawn.
Evening.
I feel I should preface everything I say tonight with the fact that children's service is a bit of a new thing for me, so bear with me. On the section of our offer, it says you want a focused approach where services are provided as soon as additional needs are identified. Is that not what happens now? Is this a new offer? If that's not what happens now, because that seems eminently the right way to go, what's the change? What's the difference in what things are now to what you want them to be?
Well, you're absolutely right, Councillor Jones. It is what we do now, in the sense of, absolutely, if additional needs are identified, absolutely, that's when we would be offering our services. I think what we've done up until now is had quite a paternalistic approach, and offered services. We've offered quite a range of universal services as well, and where additional needs have not been identified, and it's that group of services that we're looking at using our community and voluntary sector more effectively than we have in the past.
Okay. Speaking of which, the offering more training to partners, is there a willingness by the partners to be trained?
Yeah. No, it's a really good question, actually, and interestingly, I think over the last 12 months, strangely, the pandemic has strengthened our partnerships across the piece, and at the last Children and Young People's Partnership meeting, and every partner is represented, we did a similar workshop with our partners, and it was an overwhelmingly positive response. So they heard it was pretty much the same presentation as you've received today, and it was an overwhelmingly positive response. Now, the training is really about some of it's about giving people confidence, so they hear things like the lead professional role and coordinating a team around the child, and think that and for some of our partners that feels uncomfortable, or it feels as if it might be a burden, and so some of that's around training around what that role actually is, what it means, because most of the time they're probably doing something very similar anyway. But we're very much, this is why it is a bit of a but there is the culture change as well that we're working on, and but we are pushing at an open door now with our partners, which is really welcome.
That's good to know. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you very much, Miranda. Peter French.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. I absolutely support your sort of move to look at early help and also work with partners to do that. I guess my question around it is, I'm guessing that Rutland is like everywhere else where referrals really have gone up, and there's a much greater need for children's services now following the pandemic and so on. And I just wondered how you were going to look at any sort of children that fell through the net, or where you couldn't quite manage to reach the early help situation.
Okay. I mean, in terms of referrals, we haven't seen a huge spike in referrals, interestingly, in Rutland. In terms of volume, what we have seen is a change in the complexity, the nature of referrals. So we are seeing more complex needs being presented than perhaps we did previously. In terms of children, in terms of the early help, that's, you know, obviously we have a limited resource, and this is part of why we're doing this piece of work, to absolutely make sure that no child does fall through the net, and to build very much a safety net within our community, and within as well as and our partners, so that we're not the only safety net, actually, so to avoid them falling between the gaps, so to speak. And so that's a really key focus of this piece of work.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Nick, you've got your hand up again? Or is that,
I do indeed.
Legacy? It's a new one, isn't it?
It is a new hand indeed. I want to move the focus actually away from Dawn and on to my friend, Mr. Wilby. How, as portfolio holder, are you going to monitor progress and monitor outcomes and keep Cabinet reassured that we are on the right track so we have no potential surprises 2 years down the line?
Thank you, Chair. By doing what I do at the moment, I report back to you truthfully and honestly as quickly as I can. And if we identify a problem, I let you know about it. I go to a lot of the meetings, and I can tell from the vibe. I may not be a professional, but you can tell the vibe from the people on how we're doing. Peter French will confirm, and this is partly in reply to or just colouring Miranda's question, in terms of training, a lot of our folks, and particularly in the early years settings and things like that, are clamouring to get on our training times. And when we have training weekends or training sessions, should I say, not necessarily a weekend, they're always full, and the folk have been coming forward so that we can try and identify any problems perceived with the children as early as possible. But in terms of what quantifiable results I can give to you, I guess the Ofsted result will be one thermometer reading. And you know how hard we are working to improve our Ofsted, and I'm confident, he said with lots of confidence, that the next time they come, we will get a much better report than we did last time. But I think the clamour from our voters and people out there will tell you whether we're doing a good job or not. Our job is to try and keep everyone happy, keep them safe, and keep them moving in the right direction. And I think Dawn and the team have done a wonderful job of putting this together as a sustainable, and let me quote that, sustainable way of pressing forward. And listening to my other colleagues in the East Midlands area, we're all in the same boat, and we're all trying to do more with less. And it would seem that we are, I think at the moment, slightly ahead of some of the others because we're smaller. You know, sometimes we lose out because we're small and we don't have huge resources. And a lot of our posts are digital, and you know, it's hard, as we know from other parts of RCC. If someone goes down, then it's quite difficult. But I think our department is working well. They're well focused, they're well led, and I believe that you will see in 18 months, you know, the sort of results that will make you glow.
David, thank you. I wasn't insinuating that you weren't doing a good job, but our role of scrutiny is to keep portfolio holders honest as opposed to officers. So I think it's only right that I posed the same question to you as I did to Dawn about how this was going to be monitored and we keep getting the reassurances that we need. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Beggy, and thank you, Councillor Wilby. Sam, you wanted to speak. Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of questions, Dawn, just around the integrated transitions, which I welcome because it's always been historically a sticky area. And it's just really of two elements of that in our case reviews that have been looked at. And the first thing is around parental disputes and also around sometimes witnessing trauma. And I didn't know whether whether there was any link that we would be moving forward around the new Domestic Violence Act and the fact that there is part of that act now covers children's experiences within and around living through domestic violence, and whether we'd be hoping that in future this will have been picked up much earlier through the services we are going to offer through the Act. And actually, so we'll hopefully, by the time they become to transition in future, might not be such an issue in their lives. And the second one was just regarding post-abuse trauma counselling. And how does it link with our other services, such as I'm thinking around waiting lists on places like Juniper House in Leicester, where we do referrals, and also whether there are links in and what the how kind of waiting lists affects should our young people not be ready and to welcome counselling at a particular stage in their life, how we can then offer that at a point that they are ready for it, rather than them having to wait and for them to then, it creates more problems if there's a wait when they're ready to address, rather than waiting for crisis.
Thanks, Sam. I'll take each bit in turn. So in terms of domestic abuse and AR new duties, but one of as you've picked up, one of the really key things, which I think is really important, is that change of emphasis from children witnessing domestic abuse, but actually it's now that they are victims of domestic abuse in the same way as their parent or caregiver. And I think that's a really important shift in emphasis. We also we have a programme which sits within our targeted early help services around reducing parental conflict, and we're part of a regional bid for some monies to implement that programme, which has been successful, I know, which actually is looking also, so it's looking at that kind of whole element around not just, it's kind of it gets badged as domestic abuse, if you like, and I think that's goes back to what I was saying in terms of us really kind of looking at that preventative work to stop escalation. And then in terms of access to emotional or mental health services at an early stage, we already have we have one fully trained up and one another worker going through the training for access to psychological therapies, and it's not a mental health post, but it is about kind of being able to offer that psychological therapeutic support to children and young people at a very early stage, rather than having to, rather than needs escalating and needing to go through into a CAMS type environment, which is really where we don't want our children to end up. So we have already got one fully trained, sorry, Sam, you were at one side of my screen and then just moved, so sorry. So we have one member of staff already fully trained up, and there's another one going through that training. So we'll have two practitioners who are trained in that very specific way of working. We also have mental health support teams in schools, which will be practitioners will be starting in schools September. Again, that's a sub-regional, so LLR, and in partnership with our health colleagues initiative. So there's a lot of work that we're doing in relation to mental and emotional health and well-being. That's very much targeted at that very early intervention, because we know that waiting lists for CAMHS are too long. The COVID pandemic's only made them longer, and they're not going to get any shorter anytime soon, is the truth. So we need to kind of think about getting in much earlier, which is where we're working very closely with our health colleagues on that.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Moving on then, so Richard, Councillor Coleman.
Thank you, Chair. Dawn, thank you for your presentation. Very good. Apologies if I've missed this. Obviously, Councillor Beggy mentioned success and, you know, what it's going to look like and how far away it is. What sort of timescales are we looking at for the next step? So where you've put complete the engagement sessions and reflect on feedback from stakeholders, what sort of timescales are we looking at?
Well, that's all happening over the next couple of months. So the next step in terms of, July and August is when we'll be collating it all and doing that reflection and kind of formulating something tangible that we can then put out to formal consultation with both our workforce, but obviously it would be coming to yourselves as well. So my aim is by the end of September that kind of final draft children's offer will be circulated for kind of final consultation.
Brilliant.
So
thank you very
much. That's the timescale, and then implementation would follow.
Great, thank you, Don.
Thank you. Councillor Webb, Sue, you had your hand up. It's down again now. Is that deliberate?
Yes, it was.
Okay.
Yeah, most of my points I was going to raise have been met. Just throwing it out there, Dawn, which I'm not sure if it is connected or not, but recently in the media there's been about white working class children not doing so well. To me, that's not a new thing, and I'm sure it's not with you either, Dawn. Just wondering where we stand here in Rutland with children like that.
I mean, actually, in terms of our all of our young people, regardless of background in Rutland, we actually have very, very good numbers of our children who remain in education post 16 and or employment. Vast majority of our children, young people, go on to post 16 education or employment or training, I should say. Yeah. So it's not a huge issue in Rutland, but it's something that we are very conscious of, and we're very much looking at how we build our apprenticeship offer. Yes, particularly for those children who maybe don't want to go down the academic route, but actually in a more kind of vocational route. And actually, I've just agreed with HR in Rutland to be an apprenticeship champion. So I don't know what I don't know what I've actually agreed to yet. I've got a meeting next week about it, but it felt right to volunteer. So, actually, I think it's something that, whilst it's not a huge issue for us in Rutland as such, it's something that we very much have an eye to, and we really want to encourage all of our young people to remain, you know, to be successful and aspirational. I think that's the part of it is helping them aspire to being whatever, but being something, and helping them achieve that.
Yes, I mean, it's extraordinarily sad for any group to be identified or for that. And the aspiration is definitely key to helping them move on.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That's good. Thanks, Dawn.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Wilby, although you're not first in the queue, you haven't spoken yet, so I thought I'd give you the opportunity to speak now. And then we'll go back to Miranda.
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to put a bit of colour on that for you, Sue, in terms of aspirational. I was fortunate and privileged to go along to Casterton College yesterday, where they were celebrating briefly the selection of the school into the top, well, I think they're in the top 4, certainly in the top 10, and they've got a silver award. And they had a number of children on the steps, each saying their own piece about what they thought. And I don't think it was that stage managed, but the main thing which came out to me was they all loved being at the school. They enjoyed the passion of the teachers, and they all thought to a person that they were encouraged to do the best they could. And if they went to a teacher, they knew that that teacher was going to look after them and give them the support. So it doesn't matter whether they're going to Oxford or Cambridge or wherever, but they were very much enjoying their education, and they were coming out of it with the best possible results that they could.
Thank you, David, for that. If I could just reflect on my early days as a teacher, and there was a student who actually received a certificate from me for doing something absolutely superb, but she wouldn't take the certificate home, and I had got no idea why she wouldn't. I thought all young people wanted to take things home and show off to their parents, but she said, if I do, it'll get ripped up. And so I created a little drawer for her where she could put all her awards and qualifications. We just had to deal with that when she left, that she could somehow take them with her. So it is extraordinarily sad that some people, even within themselves, a young person wants to be successful but cannot share that with family members.
Well, if I may come back to one of the early things that Dawn alluded to in her thing, that sometimes we have to try and help the families to help themselves. And really, it's about encouraging them to encourage their children and enjoy their success.
Yes. It was many moons ago, and there weren't so many agencies and bodies around to help families. Thank you.
Thank you both. And if I could move along now to Miranda, Councillor Jones.
Oh, I enjoyed listening to that. Thank you both. Just a quick one, actually, about moving away from eligibility. Where have you gone? Oh, over there. Generally, with eligibility comes funding. So if we're moving away from eligibility, does that mean we're moving away from services that could be offered? Could you just clarify that for me a bit?
Yes, so I think you're asking in relation to the transitional safeguarding.
Transitional,
yeah. So we're not looking at creating something that costs us anything. So it's looking at how we are able to flex some of our existing resource to prevent young people from escalating into higher costs. So it's an invest to save type of initiative, if you like, although it's not we're not asking for any new money to be put in. It's about cutting our cloth slightly differently in order to prevent that stem of need entering into adult services at a later point. But equally, and this is where the research would be years in the making. Part of it is trying to kind of stop that cycle of need coming back into children's services as well. But initially, you'll you'd see it in the adult sphere.
Okay, thank you, Amanda. If we've got no more questions from the floor, Dawn, I'd like to ask a few, if I may. First of all, I'd like to say that I think this is a really welcome initiative, and I wholeheartedly support the direction in which we're travelling, and that's just from a very personal perspective. The early intervention has often been a mantra of mine, and particularly as I get involved with the youth justice system. If only we had intervened earlier, etc., etc. But I do have some concerns. COVID has actually taught us that we should make better use of the VCF. And what my concern really is that if we make better use of agencies for our non-statutory work, how can we be sure that we get a consistent and conscientious approach? There is a huge diversity of abilities. So I just wonder how we intend to address that.
I think that's a good point, and part of that is the role of the Children and Young People's Partnership, and how we use that to kind of, effectively evaluate what we're doing. And we do have a quality assurance framework that we will be using to make sure that quality is there. But it really starts at the kind of training and the workforce development, and that point, and that's where we're starting, because as you've alluded to, what we want is to have skilled people and professionals, not just within children's services, but within our partners, who are able to take on that lead professional role, for example, successfully, because and some of it is actually some of it may be just quite easy gaps in knowledge that need plugging. Some of it's about confidence, and we can, absolutely will work alongside our colleagues in order to kind of build that confidence. And it may be we need to do a bit of hand holding for a while, but that's fine, because actually, that's how people build up their confidence and skills. But certainly the children young I would see the Children and Young People's Partnership has been a key vehicle to us to really moving this on.
Thank you. And actually, you've answered the second question I had, which was to do about additional training. I think that's going to be absolutely essential if you're going to actually cause a culture change, particularly amongst the social workers, where they've got to work much more closely with the VCF sector. So that's interesting. The other bit that Councillor Beggy alluded to, metrics and measuring things right at the beginning. And I do feel that one of the things that worries me is that we have a significant rise within the statutory services, either expectations or certainly the services that we have to deliver. I'm thinking of a whole host of things. So does that mean that if our statutory services are we're going to have to increase the supply of our statutory services, that we will have less money to actually go for our non-statutory services? And that actually, is this a way of trying to overcome the problem that we've got these twin pools, statutory services, the demand increasing, and that we need to get a lower threshold, not a lower threshold, but an early intervention in place? So I'm just wondering whether the financial pressures of statutory intervention will actually just undermine the whole initiative.
Yeah, I mean, it's the old dilemma, isn't it? Statutory versus non-statutory services. As you're well aware, statutory service, there's a whole host of statutory services. Most of them sit in the children's social care world. We don't actually have to offer any early help or any universal, actually. I'm not suggesting we don't, I hasten to add, but from a statutory point of view, that's not where our statutory responsibilities lie. However, what we do know is that our statutory services cost us a lot of money. So it would be foolish not to have investment in our non-statutory, for example, early help services, because we know that that's where we can really make a difference to children and families' lives, which prevent them from needing to access the high-cost statutory services, if you like. Now, there's always a push and pull. We're not unusual in Rutland, as Councillor Wilby alluded. Across the East, well, nationally, across the East Midlands and nationally, every local authority is kind of battling with the need to make budget savings and provide statutory services, but at the same time, all recognise that you can't just stop doing everything else too, because, you know, your costs would go up. So part of this work, this children's services offer work, is very much rooted in trying to create children's services in Rutland that are sustainable. And when I say sustainable, I mean financially sustainable as much as sustainable for children and families, in terms of sustainable change for children and families. They have to be absolutely financially sustainable. And that is one of the drivers for this piece of work, because that's the only way that actually we're going to see the best benefit for our children and families long term.
Yeah, which
Did
sort
that
of
answer your question?
It does indeed. It's a difficult question to answer. I wasn't expecting a full and rounded answer right here and now, but that does suggest that perhaps we should be monitoring our statutory and non-statutory spending closely, so we can actually see the benefits of this whole programme. I mean, it should show up.
And we are. I mean, it is very much part. There's a whole financial planning that sits behind all of this as well.
Yeah. So can that actually come into our KPIs, Dawn?
In terms of the
just the relationship between statutory and non-statutory spend and some of these, I'm really very, very keen to try and measure success, and it just seems to me that may be one avenue we might explore.
Yeah, I'll have a look into that.
Yeah, it may not be possible, but
it may not be possible, but give me some time to look into it.
Thank you very much. Okay, thank you very much for all of that, and thanks everybody for the questions. So are there any more questions from the floor? No? Well, thank you very much indeed, Dawn. That was most informative. So without further ado, then we'll go on to item 10, which is the annual work plan. I'd like to make, so hopefully everybody's had a chance to look at the annual work plan and that we are in rough agreement with the work plan that's been suggested for 21-22. Remember, this is a living document. It's not frozen in time, and I fully expect it to change as we react to circumstances as they crop up. One of the changes I would like to suggest is that we invite Dawn to come back to present the children's service offer in September, at our September meeting, if at all possible, and we can add that on as an additional item. Is that okay with you, Dawn?
Yes, it is. It might not be, well,
yes, if it doesn't fit,
it'll be a final draft, so that's fine. If it doesn't fit, I can always circulate it anyway, which I would do. But yeah,
okay. I think it's important that we
absolutely
we assist where possible.
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Harvey, you got your hand up.
Yes, sorry, I might be a bit premature. It was just looking at the item 1 that's put in for the September meeting, the impact of COVID on educational outcomes, and it was really a question probably to Councillor Wilby, possibly Dawn, and I was just wondering whether at that time we would have the data from our well, I know we won't have complete data, but will we have data on our GCSEs and A levels that may show where our grades are, but also how many appeals and how? No, that was my question.
DfE aren't publishing any data this year. They didn't publish data last year. They're not publishing data this year. So we won't have any data. And schools aren't obliged to provide the council when they're in academy with data, and I know for a fact they won't be.
Okay.
So
that's problematic then, isn't it? That we, we then can't really assess.
I think there's other ways that we can, I mean, even without the data, I think that agenda item will be able to give Scrutiny good information about the progress of our children and young people throughout the COVID pandemic, and you know what steps have been taken. But we're not going to have data this year, and we didn't have it last year.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Harvey. This item has actually been delayed several times, hasn't it? So it'd be really useful if we can proceed with whatever we have in September. Councillor Wilby, you have your hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Rest assured, as soon as we get something tangible that we can share with you, we will. Our results very rarely come through as early as September anyway, and you will find that as soon as the gates shut at for the summer holidays, the teachers are going to be running away to the hills as far as they can to try and recharge some of the batteries, but because they have done a hell of a job. What we will do, as soon as we've got something that we can report to you, if only it's a statement, a little written report by me or something like that, giving you a flavour of where we are, then I will, because I believe that you deserve to have some sort of tangible, not proof, but results of where we are. I can't offer you any more than that. Dawn has given you the professional answer, but I will share with you whatever I can.
Thank you, David. Does anybody have any other questions, particularly about the work plan? I don't think we need a vote on this. This is a living document, so as long as we're agreed that what we're bringing forward in September, I think that's sufficient. Okay, thank you, everybody. If anybody has any suggestions to what to include in the work plan coming up, then just please drop me a line, and we'll sort it out. So without further ado, then I'll move on to a quick discussion about the services performance at end of Q4. I'll open it to the floor. Anybody got any questions, particularly about those stats that came through on the KPIs? Okay, Councillor Beggy, I was surprised you hadn't got your hand up, sir.
Sorry, I was doing an Ainsley.
That's what it's going to be known as from now on.
Absolutely.
Is it? Father Christmas does another microphone stunt, exactly.
Thank you for the KPIs. No, I'm very pleased now that we have got some trend data. Sorry, I'm looking at my screen over here, which has got the KPIs on it. I suppose I have two concerns. There is two KPIs on there where we have got a consistent downward trend, which is not ideal. So, for example, percentage of cases closed in years stepped up to social care is one, and then the other is further up. We've got plenty of re-referrals within 12 months, which has got a cross against it, but the trend is downwards. Have we got, do we understand, do we know why and what is being done about it?
So in terms of the re-referrals, we've got a really clear focus on our re-referrals. It's the problem with our re-referrals. So what you've got there is the quarterly trend shows spikes. So it kind of sorry, the monthly trend shows spikes. So it kind of goes up and down. And so what I've asked my social care team to do is they're looking at every single one of those re-referrals to understand exactly why they're a re-referral, basically. So is it because we didn't offer the right support early enough, and then You know, is it because we closed the case down too quickly when we should have, you know, before we'd sustained improvement in that child's life? So that piece of work, that audit piece of work is being done so that we get underneath what's happening. What we do know as well though, and one element, and it goes back to the children's services offer, funnily enough, in terms of our partnership working, is sometimes when we close when a case doesn't meet children's social care threshold, so it closes to children's social care, and therefore a social worker isn't involved and coordinating all the support in that child's family, child's life, that that coordination of support starts to fall away too quickly for the family, and so actually that's one of the reasons why I'm really keen on that partner's kind of strengthening that partner's role in that lead professional, because it actually does speak directly to that particular performance indicator as well.
Thank you.
Okay. Richard, Councillor Coleman.
Thank you, Chair. Dawn, again, you know, more good work. I think it's an excellent report. You know, again, on the KPIs, the fact that 8 of them are an up arrow is always good. So good to see that we are hitting targets. And I think the national benchmarking really does add context where we sit compared to other local authorities. I also recently read through the Case for Change document that highlighted there are more children currently in the social care system than ever before. Within some areas, you know, increases of up to 129%. But I did notice the percentage of re-referrals around the pandemic seemed reasonable, but I'm assuming the reasons that the contact and the referrals received on your report actually dropped. Was that due to schools being closed?
Yes, yeah. We did it right at the beginning of the pandemic. We basically saw our contacts and referrals drop through the floor. We didn't, and there was several reasons. Partly, obviously, schools were closed, so we weren't getting any school referrals at all. A number of our health staff weren't seeing children, so they weren't seeing children directly face to face, or they were redeployed into a COVID response health service. So basically, there wasn't the same number of eyes on children. So we did see, not just us, obviously this was nationally, we saw a real drop in referrals. What I would say is that our referral rate now is back to its pre-pandemic levels, so it's stable now.
Okay, that's exactly what I was going to ask.
Yes.
Supplementary, so just make sure it has come back up, but
it's come back up to where we would expect it to be. Yeah.
Okay, but it hasn't spiked beyond what you did.
No, and that's interesting. I was anticipating more of a spike in referrals once the schools went back full time. We haven't seen that. That's not to say maybe, you know, that's not to say it won't happen. And we are monitoring those referral rates very closely.
Brilliant. Thank you, Joel.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Dawn. Richard. Councillor Wilbis.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I was just going to say, in terms of our referrals and things like that, you've got to remember that we are in a position of improvement at the moment. And so this is a report of what's been going on. And sometimes, you know, we haven't quite got where we want to be. So, you know, we're not totally foolproof yet. But what I can tell you is that the team, we've now got a pretty solid team that's in there. They are being well led, and they are being moved to make sure that they cover all the ground as well as possibly can be expected from the word go. So Nick, you know, keep an eye on it, please, but we are on the improvement.
Thank you very much indeed. Sam, Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Chair. Some of what I'm about to say just touches on what Councillor Wilby said as well. I'm actually really pleased to see the continued upward trend. Sitting on the improvement board with Councillor Wilby and with Dawn, I know how hard our social work team, both for our looked after children and around our care leavers, have worked during the whole pandemic. And actually it shows they've sustained their improvement. And the fact that we've got, certainly looking at our care leavers, that not only do we have 100% in appropriate accommodation, and also we're in touch with 100% during our pandemic, just shows how magnificent our workers have worked. And I think as a scrutiny panel, we need to acknowledge that our staff have gone above and beyond in a lot of cases. Let's not forget our care leavers do have choice, and the fact that they're choosing, and I know with some of the more complicated cases that it's taken some great work from our workers to ensure that they are in that accommodation and are now settled and progressing. And so the work behind these stats is quite extraordinary in some cases. So I'd like to offer my thanks to the teams for that. Thanks, Dawn.
I'll make sure I pass that on. Thank you, Councillor Harvey.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Harvey. Are there any more questions? Okay, thank you very much indeed then. I'm just going to very quickly answer the children's offer discussion questions you posed right at the beginning, Dawn.
Yes.
Have we got our priorities right? I think the message is that you have. There's just going to be a very difficult journey. Is there anything more we need to consider? I think probably there's a little more thought to be taken by everybody and what else we need to consider. And that'll come out in the wash, I believe, when we actually try and actually put some meat on these bones. So I would like to thank you for an excellent presentation. I think the direction of travel is absolutely marvellous. I'd also like to thank the members of the committee for such good discipline regarding hands and all the rest of it. It was so easy to actually manage all of that. So the only person who made the obligatory microphone errors was probably me. So, but I want to thank everybody. And is there any other urgent business? Joe?
No, none's been identified.
Well, thank you very much indeed. Moving on to the last item then, date and preview of the next meeting, 30th of September 2021. And this is a revised date, and you should all have a new invite for this. So once again, thank you everybody, and we'll close the meeting at 2027. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good.
Joe,
I love the salute, Nick. Love it. It's what I'm used to. Thank you.
I thought it was a sloppy army salute.
Oh, very good. Thank you all, everybody.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye.
Good night.
Bye.
Good night. Bye.